We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now let's dive into today's story. The afternoon sun filtered through the bay windows of Bob Sprague's veterinary clinic, casting warm shadows across the examination room floor. His fingers moved with practiced precision as he checked the stitches on Mrs. Henderson's tabby cat. There we go, princess. Those stitches are healing beautifully. Bob scratched behind the cat's ears, earning a contented purr. Just keep the cone on for another week, Mrs. Henderson, and she'll be good as new. You're a miracle worker, Dr. Sprague. Mrs. Henderson beamed, cradling her cat. Will you and Juana be at the neighborhood block party next weekend? Wouldn't miss it. Bob smiled, removing his latex gloves. Juana's already planning her famous guacamole. After seeing Mrs. Henderson out, Bob leaned against the reception desk where Flora Benjamin, his office manager of 5 years, was updating patient records. That's your last appointment for today, Dr. Sprague, Flora said, pushing her reading glasses up her nose. Though Michael called earlier, said something about wanting to discuss an investment opportunity over dinner. All right, the usual Sunday dinner. Bob checked his watch. Speaking of which, I should head home. Juana's probably already started marinating the steaks. The drive home took him through their quiet suburban neighborhood, where perfectly manicured lawns stretched out before craftsman-style houses. Bob pulled into the driveway of their 2-story home, its sage green exterior and white trim exactly as Juana had envisioned when they bought it 6 years ago. Max, their golden retriever, bounded across the backyard as Bob stepped out of his car. The dog's enthusiasm nearly knocked him over, tail wagging furiously as he dropped a well-worn tennis ball at Bob's feet. Hey, buddy. Bob crouched down, ruffling Max's fur. Where's Mom? The answer came in the form of music drifting from the open kitchen window, the familiar sounds of Juana's favorite Latin pop playlist, mixing with the sizzle of cooking. Inside, Juana swayed to the music as she chopped cilantro, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. The kitchen counter was already lined with appetizers for their weekly dinner with Michael and Kay. There's my favorite veterinarian, Juana smiled, accepting Bob's kiss on her cheek. How was work? Princess's stitches are healing well. Mrs. Henderson sends her love. Bob grabbed a beer from the fridge. Need any help? You can set the table. Kay texted that they might be a little late. Michael had some client meeting run long. Bob pulled plates from the cabinet, admiring how the setting sun painted their dining room in shades of amber. 8 years of marriage, and these Sunday dinners had become as natural as breathing. He remembered the day they decided on this routine, shortly after Michael and Kay had moved to Denver. Remember our first Sunday dinner here? Bob asked, laying out the silverware. When Michael nearly burned down the grill? Juana laughed, the sound warm and familiar. Kay was ready to kill him. Thank God you saved those steaks. Speaking of steaks, these smell amazing. Bob wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. You know, we could always cancel dinner, order takeout. Behave yourself, Dr. Sprague. Juana playfully swatted his hand with a dish towel. Besides, Michael said he has some exciting news about a new property development. The doorbell interrupted any further discussion. Max's barking heralded the arrival of their guests, and Bob opened the front door to find Michael and Kay on their doorstep, a bottle of wine in Michael's hand. Sorry we're late, Michael grinned, clapping Bob on the shoulder. His cousin's success in real estate investment showed in his tailored suit and designer watch. You wouldn't believe the opportunity that just landed in my lap. Kay rolled her eyes good-naturedly, her blonde hair catching the last rays of sunlight. He's been talking about nothing else all day. Please tell me Juana made her guacamole. I need something to distract him. The evening unfolded like countless others before it. They gathered around the dining table, wine flowing freely as Michael gesticulated enthusiastically about his latest venture. Bob watched Juana and Kay discuss their recent spa day, noticed how his wife's laugh seemed to light up the room. You two make it look so easy, Kay commented, glancing between Bob and Juana. The perfect power couple, successful careers, beautiful home, and still so in love. It helps that we're on the same page about everything, Bob replied, reaching for Juana's hand across the table. No surprises, no drama. Speaking of being on the same page, Michael interjected, how's the freedom of being child-free treating you? Any regrets about the vasectomy? Best decision we ever made, Bob answered without hesitation. Right, honey? Juana's smile flickered for just a moment. So briefly Bob might have imagined it. Of course. You know me, I love having the freedom to travel and focus on my career. Thank God for birth control. Kay raised her glass in a mock toast to choices that make life simpler. As laughter filled the room, Bob couldn't help but feel a surge of contentment. This was everything he'd ever wanted: a successful practice, a loving wife, good friends, and the simple pleasure of Sunday dinners with family. He'd made the right choices, taken the right steps to build this life. The evening wrapped up with coffee and Juana's homemade flan. Michael still talking about investment properties while Kay shared gossip about their mutual friends. When they finally said their goodbyes, Bob stood in the doorway with his arm around Juana's waist, watching their guests drive away. Another successful Sunday dinner, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Juana leaned into him, her voice soft. We're lucky, aren't we? The luckiest. Later that night, as Bob lay in bed listening to Juana's steady breathing beside him, he thought about Kay's words. They didn't make it look easy. Because it was easy, wasn't it? They'd built exactly the life they wanted, made all the right decisions together. He had no way of knowing that this was the last truly peaceful night he would spend in this bed, in this house, with this version of his life intact. The first crack in Bob's perfect life appeared on an ordinary Tuesday morning, as subtle as a hairline fracture in fine china. He sat in his office between appointments, reviewing patient charts when Flora knocked on his door. Dr. Sprague? Mrs. Browning is here to pick up Pepper's medication. Flora hesitated, fidgeting with her pen. She asked to speak with you privately. Molly Browning worked at the pharmacy 3 blocks from the clinic. She'd been filling prescriptions for Bob's patients for years, and her chocolate lab was a regular at his practice. Bob, Molly slipped into his office, closing the door behind her. She wore her usual white pharmacist's coat, but her expression was unusually serious. I need to talk to you about something, and I'm not sure if I should. Everything okay with Pepper's arthritis medication? It's not about Pepper. Molly perched on the edge of a chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. It's about Juana. She came into the pharmacy last week asking about prenatal vitamins. Bob's pen paused mid-signature. Prenatal vitamins? She said they were for her sister Angela, who's trying to conceive. Molly leaned forward, lowering her voice. But Bob, I saw her at Whole Foods yesterday, putting the same vitamins in her cart. I know it's none of my business, but you're right, it's probably for Angela. Bob forced a smile, though something cold had settled in his stomach. Juana knows the vasectomy was permanent. We made that decision together. Molly didn't look convinced. Of course. I care about you both. And something fell off. After Molly left, Bob sat staring at his computer screen, not really seeing it. Juana had been acting different lately, turning down wine at dinner parties, begging off their morning runs claiming fatigue. He'd attributed it to stress from her real estate work. But now, Dr. Sprague? Flora's voice startled him. Your next appointment is here. And she paused, that same hesitation from earlier returning. I saw Mrs. Sprague having lunch with your cousin yesterday. At Café Meridian. Bob frowned. Café Meridian? That's clear across town from both their offices. They seemed... Flora chose her words carefully. Very engaged in their conversation. I wouldn't mention it, but they were sitting in a back corner, and when they saw me, they seemed startled. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Bob stood straightening his lab coat, probably discussing a property listing. But that night, as he watched Juana prepare dinner, he noticed things he'd been overlooking. The way she checked her phone more frequently, always angling the screen away from him. How she'd started taking calls in another room, speaking in hushed tones. Michael's really excited about this new development project, she mentioned casually over dinner. He thinks it could be my biggest commission yet. Must be quite a property. Bob kept his tone neutral. You've been spending a lot of time on it. You know Michael, thorough to a fault. Wants everything perfect before we move forward. Juana pushed her food around her plate. Actually, I'm not feeling great. Think I'll skip wine tonight? That's happening more often lately. Bob watched her face carefully. Everything okay? Just tired. Work's been crazy. She stood, collecting their plates. Oh, I might be late tomorrow. Meeting with Michael to look at some comparables. Bob waited until she'd gone upstairs before pulling out his phone. A quick check of their shared calendar showed no appointment listed for tomorrow. He thought about Molly's concerned face, Flora's hesitation, the prenatal vitamin supposedly for Angela. The sound of Juana's phone buzzing on the counter drew his attention. A text notification lit up the screen. Asterisk Michael. Tomorrow 1 p.m. Same place. Need to talk about telling him, asterisk. Bob stared at the message until the screen went dark, his perfect life suddenly feeling like a house of cards in a growing wind. Rain drummed against the windows of Bob's clinic, matching his darkening mood. It had been 3 days since he'd seen the text message, 3 days of watching his wife more closely, of noticing all the little things that had been hiding in plain sight. Dr. Sprague? Flora stood in his doorway, concern etched on her face. You've been staring at that same chart for 20 minutes. Just thinking? Bob rubbed his eyes. Flora, how long have you known about Juana and Michael's lunches? Flora sank into the chair across from his desk. A few weeks. At first, I thought it was just business, but she twisted her wedding ring nervously. Last week, I saw them at that cafe again. He was holding her hand across the table. The confirmation hit Bob like a physical blow. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I wasn't sure. And then, Flora pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos before turning it toward him. I took this yesterday. I'm so sorry, Bob. The image showed Michael and Juana leaving a medical building, Dr. Sarah Chin's obstetrics practice. Juana's hand rested protectively over her stomach, Michael's arm around her shoulders. I should have seen it. Bob's voice was barely audible. All the signs were there. That evening, he sat in his car outside their house, watching through the window as Juana paced the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. Even from here, he could see her agitation in her quick movements, the way she ran her fingers through her hair. Bob's phone buzzed, a text from Kay. Asterisk can't make Sunday dinner. Michael's working late again, starting to wonder if I'm crazy for suspecting something, asterisk. He typed back, you're not crazy. Inside, Juana's voice drifted down the hallway as he quietly entered through the garage. She was in their bedroom, door half closed. I don't know how to tell him, Angela. A pause. No, he'll find out soon enough. Yes, Michael thinks it's best to wait. Bob leaned against the wall, his world tilting on its axis. In the living room, Max whined softly, sensing the tension in the house. It's complicated, Juana continued. Michael says, no, Kay doesn't. I have to go. I think I heard Bob's car. He slipped into his home office before she could discover him, opening his laptop with shaking hands. A quick search brought up Preston Walter's private investigation firm. His old college roommate had gone into the business after leaving the police force, building a reputation for discretion and thoroughness. Bob stared at the contact information, his cursor hovering over Preston's email address. In the kitchen, he could hear Juana moving around, probably starting dinner like any normal evening. Like she hadn't just been discussing how to tell her husband about her affair with his cousin, about a pregnancy that couldn't possibly be his. The sound of her humming, that same tune she always hummed while cooking, nearly broke him. How many nights had he found comfort in that sound? How many meals had they shared, plans they'd made, dreams they'd built, all while this betrayal was growing beneath the surface. His phone buzzed again, Michael this time. Asterisk, hey cuz, might have to rain check on Sunday. Big client meeting Monday morning, need to prep, asterisk. Bob's finger hovered over Preston's number. There was still a chance he was wrong, that there was some explanation that wouldn't shatter his world into irreparable pieces. But deep down he knew. The prenatal vitamins, the secret lunches, the missed dinners, the hidden conversations. They were all pieces of a puzzle he hadn't wanted to see. Honey, Juana's voice called from the kitchen. Dinner's almost ready. Be right there. He forced his voice to stay steady, even as he typed out an email to Preston. Asterisk, need your help. Discretion essential. Call me tomorrow, asterisk. As he hit send, Bob felt something shift inside him. The last remnants of blind trust falling away, replaced by a cold determination to uncover the full truth, no matter how much it hurt. He stood, straightening his shoulders, and walked to the kitchen where his wife waited, wearing her familiar smile like a mask he could finally see through. "How was your day?" she asked, setting plates on the table. "Enlightening," he replied, watching her face for any flicker of guilt. "Very enlightening." The storm was gathering, and soon it would break over all their heads. But for now, Bob sat down at dinner with his wife, tasting nothing as she chatted about her day, about properties and clients, and all the lies that had become their normal. The perfect life he'd thought they'd built was already gone. He just hadn't admitted it yet. Preston Walters sat across from Bob in a quiet corner of a coffee shop 10 blocks from the veterinary clinic. His weathered face showed none of the shock Bob had expected upon hearing the story. "You're sure about this?" Preston stirred his black coffee, his ex-detective instincts evident in his measured tone. "Once we start digging, there's no going back." Bob pulled out his phone, showing Preston the text messages he'd discovered while helping Juana with her phone's email settings. "She asked me to fix her email sync issues. When I opened her messages to check the settings, I saw deleted conversations with Michael in the recently deleted folder. She grabbed the phone before I could read them, but enough to know something's wrong." Preston nodded, pulling out a small notebook. "And your cousin's wife?" "Kay. She's been canceling our regular dinners. Barely speaks to Michael when they're together." Bob's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. "Last week, she asked me if I'd noticed anything different about Juana and Michael's business meetings." Preston's pen moved across the paper, jotting down notes. "All right, here's what we'll do. I'll put eyes on both of them, trace their movements, build a timeline. You keep acting normal. Any change in your behavior could tip them off." Over the next 2 weeks, Preston's updates arrived in encrypted emails, each one driving the knife deeper into Bob's heart. Asterisk Day 3. Subject J meets Subject M at Cafe Meridian, 1:15 p.m. Physical contact observed, hand-holding, intimate posture. Meeting duration, 72 minutes, asterisk. Asterisk Day 7. Subjects tracked to Madison Street apartment building. Entered at 2:30 p.m., emerged 4:45 p.m. Photos attached, asterisk. Asterisk Day 10. Subject K. Observed meeting with Omar Owen, divorce attorney. Carried thick folder of documents, asterisk. The final email arrived on a Wednesday morning. Asterisk Bob, you need to see this. Meet me in my office. Bring a flash drive. Preston, asterisk. Preston's office occupied the second floor of a converted Victorian house. File cabinets lined the walls, and multiple monitors displayed security camera feeds. He gestured Bob to a chair and inserted a flash drive into his computer. I wasn't the only one watching them. Preston turned one monitor toward Bob. Kay hired her own PI 2 months ago. She's been building a case. The screen showed photos. Michael and Juana entering an apartment building, receipt copies from a joint bank account, medical records from Dr. Chen's obstetrics practice. The apartment's leased under a shell company Michael created, Preston explained. He's been siphoning money from his investment clients to pay for it. Kay's lawyer has everything documented. Bob stared at a photo of Juana leaving the doctor's office, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. She's really pregnant. Almost 4 months, according to the medical records Kay's team obtained. Preston's voice softened. I'm sorry, Bob. There's more. Kay's lawyer, Omar Owen, he's known for handling high-profile divorces. He's already drafted the papers. Does Kay know we're here? She reached out to me yesterday. Preston pulled up an email. She wants to coordinate the dinner party this weekend. Your practice's anniversary celebration? She thinks that's when Juana plans to announce the pregnancy. Bob leaned back, his mind racing. 10 years building my practice. 8 years of marriage. And they're planning to announce their affair at my anniversary dinner. What do you want to do? A cold clarity settled over Bob. Let them have their moment. But I'll have a few surprises of my own. Before leaving Preston's office, Bob made 2 calls. The first to his bank, the second to his lawyer. By the time he drove home, separate accounts had been established and preliminary divorce papers were being drawn up. That evening, Juana chatted about dinner plans while Bob watched her with new eyes, noting every subtle tell. The way she checked her phone under the table, how she touched her stomach when she thought he wasn't looking. I invited Michael and Kay for Saturday, Bob mentioned casually. Thought we could celebrate the practice's anniversary. Saturday? A flicker of something crossed Juana's face. That's perfect, actually. I have some news to share, too. Can't wait to hear it. Bob smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. I have a feeling it'll be a night to remember. Saturday evening arrived crisp and clear, autumn painting the Denver suburbs in shades of gold and crimson. Bob spent the morning at the clinic, using the quiet time to pack 2 suitcases which he stored in the hall closet. Each item he folded felt like another nail in the coffin of his marriage. When he returned home, Juana was already preparing for dinner, humming as she arranged flowers, her favorites, white lilies, in their best crystal vase. I pulled out the good china, she called from the dining room. Since we're celebrating, special occasion deserves special treatment. Bob's voice remained steady as he watched her set the table, each precise movement a rehearsal for her upcoming performance. Need any help? Could you open the wine? Let it breathe. Juana adjusted a place setting. Though I think I'll stick to sparkling water tonight. Still not feeling well? The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken knowledge. Actually, Juana's hand drifted to her stomach, then dropped quickly. Let's wait for Michael and Kay. Right on cue, the doorbell rang. Michael stood on the doorstep, a bottle of expensive champagne in hand. His confident smile faltered slightly when he met Bob's eyes. The man of the hour! Michael's enthusiasm seemed forced. 10 years running the best vet clinic in Denver. That's worth celebrating. Kay followed him in, her face a careful mask. She handed Bob a gift bag. Congratulations. Though I think there might be more than one celebration tonight. The question caused a visible tension in both Michael and Juana. Bob pretended not to notice, ushering them into the dining room where candles flickered in elegant holders. Everything looks beautiful, Kay commented, her fingers trembling slightly as she accepted a glass of wine. They settled into their usual seats, Bob and Juana at the ends, Michael and Kay along the sides. The first course passed in a blur of small talk and forced laughter. Remember when you first opened the clinic? Michael swirled his wine. Everyone said you were crazy to take such a risk. Some risks pay off. Bob's gaze flicked between his cousin and his wife. Others, not so much. As their plates were cleared for the main course, Juana stood, smoothing her dress with shaking hands. The moment had arrived. Since we're all here, celebrating new beginnings. Her eyes met Michael's briefly. I have wonderful news. She turned to Bob, her smile brittle. Honey, I'm expecting a baby boy. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the usual traffic noise from their quiet street seemed muted, as if the world held its breath. Bob slowly wiped his mouth with his napkin, laid it down with deliberate care. That's interesting. His voice was soft but carried clearly across the table, considering I had a vasectomy 3 years ago. The color drained from Juana's face. Michael's wine glass froze halfway to his lips. Maybe, Bob continued, rising from his chair, you should tell my cousin Michael he's going to be a father? The room spun with unspoken words as Bob walked to the hall closet. The sound of his footsteps on the hardwood floor echoed like gunshots in the silence. Bob, I can explain. Juana's voice cracked as he returned with 2 packed suitcases. Can you? He set the luggage by the dining room door. Can you explain the apartment on Madison Street? The secret bank account? The doctor's appointments? Michael half rose from his chair. Listen, cousin, sit down. Kay's voice cut through the room like ice. She reached into her purse, removing a manila envelope. I believe you have some papers to sign, Michael. Kay. Michael's confidence crumbled as she slid divorce papers across the table. How did you? Did you really think you could hide everything? Kay's hands shook, but her voice remained steady. The apartment? The embezzled client funds? I've known for weeks. Juana collapsed back into her chair, one hand pressed against her stomach. This isn't how this was supposed to go. How was it supposed to go? Bob's laugh held no humor. Were you going to tell me after the baby was born? Pretend it was a miracle? Or were you planning to wait until you transferred more of my savings into your secret account? Michael's face hardened. You don't understand. We fell in love. Love. Kay slammed her hand on the table, making the crystal water glasses jump. Is that what you call stealing from your clients to fund your affair? Is that what you call lying to your wife, your cousin, your best friend? The expensive bottle of champagne Michael had brought sat unopened, condensation beating on its surface like tears. I trusted you. Bob's voice dropped to a whisper. Both of you. With everything, we never meant to hurt anyone. Want to reach for him, but Bob stepped back. It just happened. Things like this don't just happen, Wanna. Bob gestured to the suitcases. Affairs don't just happen. Secret apartments don't just happen. Stealing money doesn't just happen. These are choices. Choices you both made every single day for months. Michael stood again, desperation replacing his usual confidence. Kay, please. We can talk about this. Talk. Kay's laugh was brittle. Like you talked to me about the apartment? About the baby? Omar's team has everything documented, Michael. Everything. Omar Owen? Michael's face went ashen. You hired Omar Owen? A ruthless lawyer for a ruthless betrayal. Kay's smile didn't reach her eyes. He's very thorough. Your clients will be interested in his findings about their investments. Wanna moved toward the suitcases. Where am I supposed to go? The apartment on Madison Street seems appropriate. Bob's voice was eerily calm. Though you might want to hurry. Once Michael's clients learn where their money went, it might not be available much longer. The room fell silent again, broken only by the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. A wedding gift from Michael and Kay, ironically enough. I'll have my lawyer contact you both on Monday. Bob opened the front door. I suggest you find good representation. You're going to need it. Michael stood frozen, the divorce papers untouched before him. Kay gathered her things, her movements precise and controlled. I'll be at my sister's, she announced. Have your lawyer send any additional documents there. As Juana wheeled her suitcases toward the door, she paused. Bob, please, the baby is Michael's responsibility now. Bob stepped aside, holding the door wider. Just like you are. They filed out one by one. First Juana, then Michael, finally Kay. The sound of car doors slamming, engines starting, and vehicles pulling away marked the end of 8 years of marriage, a lifetime of friendship, and countless shared dreams. Bob stood in his empty dining room, surrounded by the wreckage of his carefully planned dinner party. The candles still burned, casting shadows on the unused champagne bottle and the half-eaten meals. On Juana's plate, her napkin lay crumpled like a white flag of surrender. He pulled out his phone, dialing Preston's number. It's done, he said simply. Send everything to the lawyers first thing Monday. After hanging up, Bob methodically extinguished each candle, wrapped the untouched champagne bottle, and cleared the plates. In the kitchen, he found Juana's favorite coffee mug in the dishwasher, the one he'd given her on their first anniversary. He placed it in one of the boxes he'd prepared earlier, along with other items she'd left behind. Tomorrow, he would begin the process of rebuilding his life. Tonight, he allowed himself to mourn what he'd lost, what had never really existed, and what could never be again. The grandfather clock struck 10, its chimes echoing through the empty house. In the corner, Max whined softly and pressed against Bob's leg, offering comfort in the only way he knew how. It's just you and me now, buddy. Bob scratched behind the dog's ears. Just you and me? Omar Owen's corner office overlooked downtown Denver, its glass walls reflecting the morning sun as he spread documents across his mahogany desk. Kay sat straight-backed in a leather chair while Bob occupied another, both listening as the attorney detailed his findings. The evidence is overwhelming. Owen's precise voice matched his immaculate appearance. Not only the affair and the pregnancy, but the financial improprieties. He turned a document toward them. Mr. Proctor hasn't just been maintaining a secret apartment. He's been systematically defrauding his investment clients. Kay's hands clenched in her lap. How bad is it? We've identified at least 12 clients whose funds were diverted to personal accounts. Owen pulled out a spreadsheet. The apartment, luxury gifts for Mrs. Sprague, weekend getaways, all funded with stolen money. Classic Michael. Bob's voice carried cold contempt. Living large on other people's dreams. He's been sloppy. Owen allowed himself a thin smile. Overconfident. The paper trail is clear enough that the SEC will be very interested. A knock interrupted them. Owen's assistant entered with a tablet. Sir, you want to see this? Geraldine Baldwin just issued a statement. Owen scanned the tablet, then passed it to Bob. The headline read, Premier Denver Reality terminates agent over moral clause violations. Your wife's former employer isn't pulling punches, Owen commented. The statement specifically cites conduct unbecoming and breach of trust as grounds for termination. Bob read Geraldine's quote aloud. Our firm is built on trust. Mrs. Sprague's actions demonstrate a fundamental betrayal of that principle. We cannot maintain professional relationships with individuals who show such disregard for basic ethics. The dominoes are falling faster than expected, Owen noted. Once news of Mr. Proctor's financial irregularities breaks. As if on cue, Kay's phone buzzed with a text. Michael's firm just called an emergency board meeting, she reported, her voice steady. Apparently some clients have started asking questions about their accounts. Owen gathered the documents into organized piles. Mrs. Gregory, we'll file your divorce petition this afternoon. Mr. Sprague, my associate has your paperwork ready. Given the circumstances, both cases should proceed smoothly. They won't contest? Kay asked. They can't afford to. Owen's smile grew sharper. Literally, once the SC freezes Mr. Proctor's assets. As for Mrs. Sprague, he glanced at Bob. The prenuptial agreement you signed is quite clear regarding infidelity. Bob stood, straightening his jacket. What's our next step? Let the system work, Owen advised. The criminal investigation into Mr. Proctor's financial dealings will trigger automatically once we file. Mrs. Sprague's career is already suffering. Their social circle. He shrugged. People don't look kindly on those who betray family. Later that day, Bob sat in his clinic's office, reviewing appointment schedules when Flora knocked softly. Dr. Sprague, there's something you should see. She handed him her phone, open to a local news website. The headline made him grimace. Prominent investment manager under investigation. Clients allege millions missing. Below was a photo of Michael leaving his office, Juana trying to shield her face from cameras. The article detailed allegations of fraud, mentioning the affair as part of a pattern of ethical violations. Flora touched his shoulder gently. The waiting room's been full of support. Mrs. Henderson brought cookies. Even Dr. Richards called to say he's referring all his overflow cases to us. People choose sides in these situations, Bob observed. They choose truth, Flora corrected. They choose integrity. His phone buzzed, a text from Juana. Asterisk, please, we need to talk. About the baby. About everything, asterisk. Bob deleted it without responding. Through his office window, he could see clients arriving with their pets. Life continuing despite the earthquake that had shaken his world. He had a practice to run, a future to build, and no time for those who'd chosen to destroy everything they'd once shared. 3 months after the confrontation dinner, Bob found himself sitting across from Frankie Diaz in her warmly lit counseling office. Kay had insisted he meet with her college friend, claiming Frankie's perspective as both a trauma counselor and a divorce survivor would help. You're handling this differently than most clients, Frankie observed, her dark eyes keen but kind. There's an unusual clarity in your responses. Should I be more devastated? Bob's question held genuine curiosity. There's no should in trauma recovery. Frankie leaned forward. But most people in your situation struggle more with anger, with questioning themselves. You seem resolved, Bob supplied. Because I am. They made their choices. I made mine. Tell me about those choices. Bob stood, pacing to the window. I could have raged, could have let their betrayal destroy me. Instead, I chose to build something better. He told her about the changes at his practice. How Flora had helped him restructure operations, expanding their services to include emergency care. How they'd started a program providing free veterinary care to local shelters. You're channeling pain into purpose, Frankie noted. That's healthy, but don't forget to process the emotions too. I feel them, Bob admitted, but I won't let them control me. Michael and Juana, he shook his head. They're writing their own ending. Indeed they were. The local papers had followed Michael's downfall with increasing interest. His firm had suspended him pending investigation. Former clients were filing lawsuits. The apartment on Madison Street stood empty, its rent unpaid for months. Juana's situation wasn't much better. No local real estate agency would touch her. Her sister Angela had stopped speaking to her after learning the full story. She'd been forced to move in with Michael in a small apartment on the outskirts of town, their former lives of luxury crumbling around them. Back at the clinic, Bob threw himself into work. Flora's organizational skills proved invaluable as they expanded services and hired additional staff. The new overnight emergency care is bringing in steady cases, Flora reported one morning, setting a coffee on his desk. And Lee says the shelter program is making a real difference. Bob smiled, thinking of Flora's husband spending weekends helping transport rescue animals. We got good people here. Speaking of good people, Flora hesitated. Kay called. She's starting her own investment consulting firm, focusing on helping women secure their financial futures. She'd like your advice on some business aspects. The unlikely friendship that had grown between Bob and Kay surprised many, but made sense to those who knew them best. They met for coffee regularly, sharing updates on their parallel journeys of recovery. Omar says the divorce proceedings are almost finished, Kay mentioned during one such meeting. Michael's trying to delay, but with the criminal charges pending, Bob nodded. His own divorce had finalized quickly, Juana having no grounds to contest given the prenup and circumstances. How are you holding up? Better than them. Kay's smile held satisfaction. My new firm is taking off. Turns out there's a market for financial advisors who actually care about their clients' money. You've turned betrayal into strength, Bob observed. We both have. Kay stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Have you talked to Frankie lately? Weekly sessions. Bob felt his expression soften slightly. She's insightful. Just insightful. Kay's eyes twinkled. Because she asks about you too. 1 year to the day after the confrontation dinner, Bob's home filled with warmth and genuine laughter. The guest list was smaller, but infinitely more meaningful. Kay and her new partner Gene Chapman, Flora and Lee Johnson, and Frankie, running late from her counseling center. The dining room had been redecorated, erasing the last traces of that fateful night. New art brightened the walls. Chosen with Frankie's help during weekend antiquing trips that had gradually evolved from friendly outings to something more. To new beginnings. Kay raised her glass, her other hand clasped with Gene's. Her investment firm had become Denver's go-to resource for women seeking financial independence. And true friends, Flora added. She and Lee had become fixtures in Bob's life, their steady support never wavering through the darkest days. The doorbell rang. Bob opened it to find Frankie, slightly breathless. Sorry I'm late. Crisis at the center. You're right on time. Their hands touched as she entered, a spark of connection that had grown naturally over months of healing conversations and shared understanding. As they settled around the table, conversation flowed easily. Gene shared stories from his legal practice, while Lee updated everyone on the shelter program's success. Flora proudly reported that the clinic's emergency care service had saved its 100th pet that week. Heard anything about Michael and Juana? Gene asked during dessert. Kay nodded grimly. They moved to Cincinnati last month. Michael's facing federal charges for the investment fraud. What? She shrugged. The baby was born. They're struggling, from what Angela tells me. Karma, Lee commented, but Bob shook his head. Not karma. Consequences. They chose their path. He looked around the table, at these people who had helped him build something better from the ashes of betrayal. We chose ours. Frankie's hand found his under the table, a quiet gesture of understanding and support. Through her counseling, she'd helped him process the betrayal, but somewhere along the way, they discovered a connection deeper than therapist and patient. The evening wound down naturally, couples departing with warm hugs and plans for future gatherings. Kay lingered last, pulling Bob aside. You know, when I first learned about Michael and Juana, I thought my life was over, she admitted. But looking around tonight, we built something better, Bob finished. After the last guest left, Bob and Frankie stood in his kitchen, cleaning up together with the comfortable familiarity of people who fit naturally into each other's spaces. Happy? She asked, reading his expression with her counselor's insight. Bob considered the question, thinking of his expanded practice, the shelter program, the strong friendships that had replaced superficial ones. He thought of Michael and Juana, facing the consequences of their choices in Cincinnati, their glittering lives reduced to shame and struggle. Most of all, he thought of how betrayal had cleared his life of pretense, making room for authentic connections and genuine love. Yes, he answered simply, drawing Frankie closer. I'm happy. Max trotted in, tail wagging as he settled at their feet. Through the window, Denver's lights twinkled under a star-filled sky. In the end, Bob reflected, sometimes life's worst betrayals lead to its greatest gifts. If you're strong enough to choose wisdom over bitterness, growth over defeat. The best revenge, after all, wasn't just living well. It was living truthfully, surrounded by people who understood the value of loyalty, honor, and real love. Epilogue. 5 years had passed since the night that shattered the facades of perfect lives, and Denver's autumn carried a crisp reminder of how much had changed. Bob Sprague stood in his expanded veterinary clinic's new wing, watching as donors and reporters gathered for the grand opening of the Second Chance Animal Trauma Center, a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to providing emergency care for rescue animals. Flora Benjamin, now his clinic's chief operating officer, appeared at his side with a tablet displaying the day's schedule. Channel 9 wants an interview about the expansion. They're particularly interested in how the clinic became Denver's leading veterinary trauma center. Success is the best revenge, Bob smiled, adjusting his tie. The past 5 years had been kind to him. At 47, he carried himself with the confident ease of a man who had rebuilt his life on stronger foundations. The clinic had grown from a local practice to a regional veterinary center, with 3 locations across Denver and a new trauma center. Their shelter program had saved thousands of animals, earning recognition from national animal welfare organizations. Dr. Sprague? A young reporter approached, notepad ready. Is it true your ex-wife tried to contact you about featuring the clinic's success story in a documentary? Bob's expression hardened slightly. No comment on personal matters. We're here to talk about the animals. The reporter persisted. But given the recent news about Michael Proctor's sentencing, that's not relevant to today's event. Frankie Diaz Sprague interrupted smoothly, joining her husband. Their wedding rings caught the morning light. They'd married 2 years ago in a small ceremony, with Kay as maid of honor and Flora's husband Lee as best man. The reporter's face showed recognition. After all, Dr. Francesca Diaz Sprague had made headlines herself, her trauma counseling center having expanded to 3 locations, specializing in helping victims of betrayal and financial fraud. Many of her clients were former investors who'd lost money to schemes like Michael's. Later that evening, Bob and Frankie hosted a dinner party at their new home, a modern ranch house with sprawling grounds where Max and his new companion, a rescued German shepherd named Luna, had plenty of room to play. Kay and Jean Chapman arrived first, Kay's success evident in her confident bearing. Her investment firm, Secure Futures Financial, had become a powerhouse in Denver's financial sector, specifically catering to women taking control of their finances after divorce or loss. She'd recently been featured in Forbes magazine's Women to Watch section. Flora and Lee Johnson came next, their twin toddlers in tow, a boy and girl who considered Bob and Frankie their honorary aunt and uncle. The children made a beeline for the dogs while the adults gathered in the living room. Did you see the Cincinnati Gazette articles? Jean asked, accepting a glass of wine. As a partner in Omar Owen's law firm now, he kept tabs on certain cases of interest. About Michael? Kay's voice held no emotion. Hard to miss a headline like, former investment manager faces additional charges. The story had been spreading through financial circles. Michael Proctor, already serving time for his original fraud convictions, was facing new charges related to attempted investment schemes run from prison. His fall from grace had been spectacular and complete. Angela called last week, Kay continued, referring to Juana's sister. Apparently, Juana's working as a receptionist at a dentist's office. The irony of her filing insurance paperwork for $15 an hour isn't lost on anyone. What about the boy? Flora asked, bouncing her daughter on her knee. Started kindergarten, Kay replied. Angela says he looks just like Michael, which isn't doing Juana any favors in the Cincinnati social circle she's trying to break into. They live in a 2-bedroom apartment in a questionable neighborhood. She tried selling real estate again, but she shrugged. Google makes it hard to escape your past. Speaking of pasts, Lee changed the subject. The shelter program just hit a milestone. 10,000 animals saved since we started. The conversation shifted to happier topics. The clinic's expansion, Kay's new initiative helping women recover from financial abuse, Flora's innovative management strategies that other veterinary practices were trying to copy. Later that night, after their guests had left, Bob and Frankie stood on their back patio, watching the dogs play in the moonlight. A text lit up Bob's phone. Another message from Juana, like the ones that came every few months, always ignored. Asterisk, I saw the article about the trauma center. You've done amazing things. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but Bob deleted it without reading further. Still trying, he commented to Frankie. Some people never learn, she replied, understanding immediately. They think saying sorry erases consequences. Through their professional networks, they'd heard the full story of Michael and Juana's life in Cincinnati. The pregnancy that was supposed to be their new beginning had become another chain binding them to their mistakes. Michael's prison sentence had left Juana alone, struggling to support their son on a meager income. Her attempts to rebuild a real estate career had failed repeatedly as background checks revealed her past. Michael's victims included elderly investors who'd lost retirement funds, and the internet never forgot. The boy, named Michael Jr. in what many saw as a final act of arrogance, spent his weekends visiting his father in prison. Juana had tried dating, but in the age of social media, potential partners quickly discovered her history. She'd become a cautionary tale in real estate circles, her name mentioned in ethics seminars as an example of how quickly a career could be destroyed. Michael's life had crumbled even further. His prison sentence had been extended after the new charges. His cellmate had leaked his attempts to set up new investment schemes, revealing that he hadn't learned or changed. Kay had heard through legal channels that he'd tried to write a book about his side of the story, but no publisher would touch it. Their son was the innocent victim, growing up with an imprisoned father, a struggling mother, and the weight of his parents' choices shadowing his young life. The trust funds and private school plans they'd once imagined had been replaced by free school lunches and secondhand clothes. You never asked if I regretted any of it, Bob mused, watching Luna chase Max around a tree. The exposure, the legal battles, the public scrutiny. Frankie leaned into him. Because you don't. You chose integrity. They chose deception. The consequences were natural, not vindictive. She was right. Bob had rebuilt his life through hard work and honest dealings. The clinic's success came from genuine service to the community. His new marriage was built on mutual respect and shared values. Even his friendship with Kay had grown stronger, both of them rising from betrayal to build something meaningful. The next morning, Bob arrived early at the trauma center. A new rescue was coming in, a dog found abandoned, needing emergency surgery. As he scrubbed in, Flora updated him on the day's schedule. Oh, and there's this. She handed him a printout. Thought you should know. It was a social media post from Cincinnati. Juana Quinn Proctor, looking worn and aged beyond her years, standing behind a dentist's office reception desk. The caption read, 5 years ago, I had everything. Remember that when you think about betraying those who trust you. Bob handed the paper back without comment. In his surgical suite, instruments gleamed under bright lights, and a team of dedicated professionals waited to help him save another life. This was his reality now: purpose, integrity, genuine relationships, and the peace that came from knowing he'd chosen the right path. Meanwhile, in a Cincinnati prison, Michael Proctor stared at his reflection in a metal mirror, gray threading his hair, his designer clothes replaced by prison orange. In a small apartment across town, Juana answered phones and filed papers, wearing discount store clothes, her wedding ring long since pawned. Their son carried a last name that made people whisper, their choices echoing into the next generation. Back in Denver, Bob's clinic hummed with activity. A rescue dog needed saving. His team was ready, and the life he'd built after betrayal continued to flourish. Sometimes he reflected as he made the first incision, the best revenge was simply living well, while karma handled the rest. Scalpel, he said clearly, and began another day of doing what was right, leaving the past where it belonged. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.